T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, space nerds. Welcome back to the Launch Sequence Podcast. We're back for another week of news, features, rumor mills, all the talks. We've got some interesting stuff, too. DefenseCon has passed. No Squadron 42 delivery, announcement. And while the rumors are maybe hoping for a Summer Games Fest announcement, I don't know. We're going to talk about that today. But also, DefenseCon just ended. CIG made like a cool 40-something million bucks in a month. They passed $1 billion. They released the Odin, released like 6 other ships that are pretty big deals, and overall just had a successful, financially speaking, DefenseCon. But we're going to talk about it from all angles, including 4.8, what's going on with the releases, and what we can expect for the summer. I've brought in the good old-fashioned and lovely, the absolute loveliest mustache in Star Citizen, and the winner of my recent event, the Stanton Scavenger Hunt, Mr. Farrister. Thanks for joining me today, dude. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. There are many wonderful mustaches in Star Citizen, so I don't claim to be the most wonderful, but I'm very glad you enjoy it.
You're not wrong about that. In fact, I think we've had several legendary mustaches and beards on this show. I'm sure many of you are seeing my face for the first time in a little while and wondering what happened to my mustache, that little itty-bitty tuft of hair I had. I had a streamathon, guys, in the month of May that started on the first day of DefenseCon and expected to go about 4 days. After 4 days, everybody unlocked the ability for Mrs. Tomato to come on camera and cut all the hair off my head, except for my eyelashes. They passed that. And then we continued on for 7 more days. And so over the course of DefenseCon, I got 90 hours of Star Citizen play time in, and I'm going to be talking about that with Farrister today. But you've also been playing a lot of Star Citizen 4.8 lately, huh?
I have. I think there's been a lot of new gameplay brought, surprisingly a lot, and then a lot of new ships as well. So I've been spending a fair amount of time in game.
There's been a lot of discussion about how the game's been performing in 4.8. How has it been for you overall?
I mean, overall, I would say it's been okay. I do think it was a bit of a step back from 4.7, but when the release of 4.8 went literally right down to the wire, like it was almost DefenseCon. I'm like, is this patch coming? Like I knew that what we were getting was potentially going to be slightly more problematic than CIG might have liked. So it's definitely not the worst patch I've ever experienced, but it was initially, at least, it was certainly a little bit of a step back from 4.7. But things have slowly been being fixed as well over the past couple of weeks. So we'll see. We'll see how it beds in.
It was definitely, it's not like the worst patch ever, but that's not how you want to open a DefenseCon. And to me, it really felt like they wanted this DefenseCon to be a pretty big moment for the game. The lead up to it, all of the teasing they were doing, they released pictures of the ships. They were kind of like they went to Level Up Expo and did a little bit more groundwork in the mainstream. And it also felt like refueling was kind of a chance for them to bring a new player into the game and get them hooked. And 4.8 releasing really hurt that. Do you think that this was a bad enough release that it might actually change something at CIG, the way they're considering these releases, maybe the way they test these ships before going live? Or do you think they're kind of just going to blow past this and be like, well, it was rough, but we'll just keep going as business as usual?
I think they'll blow past it. I think they're going to blow past it. I mean, it was rough. It wasn't the roughest we've ever had. It did go right down to the wire, which is always indicative that things aren't looking great. But it's been a good sale for them, hasn't it? They've made a lot of money through it. So as much as you can say the player experience hasn't been what we'd hope it would be, people are still playing the game. You and I are just talking and saying we've been playing the game loads over the past couple of weeks for all of those problems.
I was
and
forced
they're selling
into
ships.
It. Okay, they wouldn't let me stop, chat. Thank you, guys. It was fun, but you're right. People are playing, and that's such a hard thing to deal with. It's like many people, I'm sure many people who are listening to this or watching are excited for Star Citizen. They want it to succeed. They love the direction it's going in, but it just doesn't feel like CIG is respecting the players who are playing that. You know, obviously there's a lot of focus on Squadron 42, but people want to see maybe not the same playability focus as what they saw last year, but at least get the feeling that CIG cares about the current play environment. They canceled the free fly last year, but not this year. They brought it back, and I think that these kinds of things are sending messages to players that don't build the most confidence.
Yeah, and I think there's a balance. You know, it's easy to say that CIG doesn't care. I'm sure that there are plenty of people working on this patch that really do care. There's a lot of really cool stuff in this patch, and you know, I can imagine that a lot of the people working on that are really excited for us to get into our hands. I think the difficulty with things like this is DefenseCon had a specific date attached to it. And had this been just a 4.9 release schedule, for example, there's the ability to give a go, no go decision. And I know people say the patch must ship, but ultimately it doesn't really have to. But when you advertise a DefenseCon that starts on a specific date at a specific time, the patch kind of does have to ship for that, especially when you've got new ships in the patch. So I think it was probably a case of being backed into a corner a little bit by things that had already been set up. I think that is not so easily repeated for a 4.9 release, because I don't think that hard deadline is going to exist. If we start encountering big problems in kind of the final waves of 4.9 test builds, I think it'll be much easier to push that back than it was for DefenseCon, given that we run out of time. Of course, from an organizational perspective, like, they made those goalposts themselves. They created this challenge themselves. Like, you don't hand in your homework 5 minutes before the due date and hope for the best. Like, there's definitely an argument that says this stuff should have been planned out more. But also, you know, I think there'll be a lot of passionate people behind the stuff that we're getting in 4.8. And there is some really cool stuff in 4.8 that I've been really enjoying. So it's easy to give CIG a hard time, I suppose. But
all too easy, I think. Sometimes I'm not gonna lie, man. They make it easy with these kinds of things, and I think, kind of to your point, that's part of the unpredictability of this whole thing, and they're just trying to react and keep it going as things happen. And I do agree, this is one of those things that's held by time. And they've had several sort of different things holding them to time like that throughout the years, from specific patches needing to go out that had specific tech or specific milestones, like 4.0, that really left people waiting a long time because they had to wait for it. 3.0 was the same. 3.18 was the same. And then there are other times when they do push patches back or push features back. And I don't think that it would have been crazy for them to push features back here. Obviously, ships can't really either, but they didn't test the ships in the PTU. And so I just find myself wondering, what is the better fix for CIG here? Is it pushing features back, like accepting that they still need to push features out of a patch to delay it? Is it accepting that ships need to go to the PTU and get tested and ruin a little bit of that reveal so that they don't release too broken? Is it that the tech preview channel needs to be used a lot more for this kind of stuff that's upcoming? I think even if they're not going to come out and tell us what went wrong and what can we fix here, it would help at least for the community to start speaking more openly about like how CIG maybe could we don't know what they could do from this perspective. We don't know all the things. It's just like there's only so much we can do, and we have to talk about something. And so I'm wondering, from our perspective, what would be the right way to go about it for CIG?
I mean, ultimately, I think this one just needed more time in testing. I think we see that from the improvements that we've seen over the past couple of weeks, that a delay of a couple of weeks would have done it. The challenge was just that DefenseCon deadline. I mean, there's some of it as well that probably only becomes obvious when you deploy at scale. So there's probably some of the problems that were experienced that they might not have even been aware of until deploy dates. And that's where testing can help. But also, there's some of it that you cannot have possibly have. Like anybody that flew the Ironclad on the first kind of, well, probably even still now, like all of those bugs with the Ironclad was so obvious to anybody that has flown that ship.
It's like
you
with
just
the Moth.
think, yeah, exactly. So I just think more time in testing, especially for things that you're hoping will drive sales. Like the Ironclad was a big sales pitch for them in this, and people were excited for it as well. Like I was so excited about the Ironclad and getting my hands on it because it is one of those ships that's kind of like a bit of an everything ship to people. So I think that was disappointing. Ultimately, it comes down to testing and time and just being ahead of the curve. I think it's easy to say, they could have dropped features for this, but what features could they have dropped? Because, like, really, part of the problem was like the problem with some of those new ships.
Yeah. Right. And maybe testing the new ships would have helped. It kind of sounds like it's brain melting energy to suggest delaying a ship release, but man, it would have been. I think the biggest giveaway is seeing the lead art director of the ship's team also agreeing and being like, it infuriates me more than, if not the same, if not more than everyone else. Like, these people, they put a lot of work into this stuff, and then it gets released broken, and when you're looking forward to hearing people happy with what you spent all that time working on.
Yeah. No, I understand it. And this is the point. I think that a lot of the developers will probably also have that frustration. They may not be able to talk about it because it wouldn't really be appropriate for them to talk about it in some instances. But ultimately, these are production decisions rather than developer decisions. This is all about, we need to get everything ready for the sale so that we can sell. But as I say, I think we will have patches that do fall into this cadence each year. IAE is always going to be another one where they kind of have to ship at the date that they say they're going to ship. But also we've got a couple of patches that I would hope CIG demonstrates much more flexibility around. So, for example, the kind of summer build where there's not really a hard in-game event, and also I want to say the Christmas build where kind of you get that early patch. It almost always seems to be like forced in just before everyone breaks up for Christmas. I don't know why, because there's no reason it needs to, but I really hope that just the lesson that I would take away from this, if I was there, it's very easy for me to say, but for me, it's just around, you ship the patch when it's ready, or you drop stuff out if it's not going to make it on time and add it in future patches. That's the whole point, I think, of this 0.1, 0.2 sub patches, is so that the stuff that doesn't make it into the committed release can still be dropped in that patch cycle, but you've got a regularly playable game. But there'll also be people that are waiting for certain features who might disagree with me on that as well. So I don't think it's an easy question.
Yeah. I do agree with you, though. I think testing is really what it comes down to. They've proven over time that they can get things relatively working, and this kind of a release just screams of stuff that didn't get to stay in the oven long enough. And it's unfortunate that that's tied to sales. And that, like you said, IAE is going to be the same way. I think everyone is just hopeful that they don't do the free flies. Like, do the free fly maybe before the major event and patch, so that the people come in for the free fly, get into the game, and then see what's coming up, and they're enticed to then go and like buy the game to get involved in the big thing that's coming up. That might help. Maybe not releasing a bunch of features during a sales heavy patch also would help. I don't know. I think we could talk about this forever, but we got more interesting things to discuss today, right?
Yeah, I think the other thing that I'd say is particularly these sales patches are like, they're probably quite brutal in terms of that day one, because everybody is trying to download the patch at the same time. Everyone is trying to log in at the same time. Everyone is trying to even go to the same place in Stanton at the same time. So,
Yeah.
like, in terms of a baptism of fire for a patch as well, it's probably the hardest launch situation that you could possibly have. And I agree with you. If you could make it so that maybe the free fly was front loaded by a little bit, maybe even the patch was ready. So you do 4.8 patch like a week before DefenseCon starts. Like, even that in itself is probably going to relieve some of the pressure. But yeah, it can't be an easy situation.
I think that's what they try to do. I feel like at least a couple of years they did that, where they would release the patch maybe like 4 or 5 days early and then have one more hotfix or point patch on the day of the event. It's just, this one was just so late that they couldn't.
Yeah.
That's rough. It's been rough, but like was said, it was still a successful launch for them, at least financially. I'm looking at the funding numbers here. Usually I'm pulling these up on the screen. I don't know if I'd be able to. Let's see. Yeah, I've got one here. So here is the funding numbers for anybody who's watching. You can see that they have successfully passed last year's May, which was 29 million, their best May ever. Last year's November, which was 32 million, that was their best month ever. And they've also surpassed the entire year of 2020, which was their first breakout year. As of right now, they are at about the same level they were in November of 2022, which was the biggest year of growth for like people joining the game. Now, it doesn't really mean a ton when you look at the citizen count and realize that they are very much down on new people joining, but money is coming in quite a bit, probably from a lot of the existing player base, and they're doing really well this year. They're already at 82 million. They are 34% ahead of where they were last year, which was a huge record-breaking year of 155 million. So I'm thinking they're probably going to make 170, 180 million dollars this year. A dang great release. So let's talk about how the game has actually been doing in that time of funding, because we've mentioned that it was very glitchy and things were happening. Do you feel like the game itself, though, has been engaging enough or improving enough that it makes sense that the funding keeps growing like this? Or does it feel like it's mostly just more ship sales and more wanting to get more stuff from the player base?
Well, I think it's difficult to know for sure. So even on that funding chart, my understanding is that that funding chart is based on the published funding numbers on the Star Citizen website, which are, I wouldn't say they're not clear, but like they might have a very different interpretation as to what counts within that. So, do they count refunds? Do they count churn? Like, is there double counting in that total and things like that? So, I take those funding numbers with a pinch of salt, because they are basically like self-published, and they're not like audited financial accounts or anything like that. That said, I think I've definitely seen a lot of interest in spending this time around, but also for previous big sales. So for the Idris, that got a lot of people interested. The Perseus, that got a lot of people interested. The Polaris, if you go back a bit further, that got a lot of people interested. And this time around, I think we had some really interesting new options for people. The M80 is a very competitive, very expensive, but very competitive fighter.
Yeah.
The Ironclad in its variants is clearly, it's been something that a lot of people have been waiting for some time. It's a shame about the bugs and the problems, but like people can actually see it in games, so that might be generating some interest. And then the Odin, where they had this massive sale for, and the people who bought it in Wave 1 knew literally nothing about the ship other than it was called the Odin. It's a battle cruise, and they're like, buy. And sometimes that's enough for people to spend $5,000. But like, I can understand why ships have got people interested. I think for me, the state of the game over the past few years has been improving. I don't know that I would necessarily say it improves to the point where I'd be willing to spend that much more on it. But for many people, like the fact that it is very playable for all of the problems, we've just been talking about how we've been playing for the last 2 weeks. It is a much more playable game than it was 10 years ago. The fact that it is in that state and people are seeing improvements probably gives an element of confidence that says, I'm not necessarily buying an ironclad because it works right now. I'm buying an ironclad because I can see the potential in it now. So I think it's a tough one. I think we actually got quite a lot with this patch. We got quite a lot with the last patches as well. So I think we are seeing some of the progress there. I think my only watch out is going to be that the more that new stuff is introduced, I don't want to see the old stuff that was previously introduced break. So like Hull C auto loading, I'm looking at you. That would probably be my biggest L, would be where they've introduced stuff, they move on to the next thing, and then they forget about those poor things they introduced last time.
Like docking, which is now being fixed again and broken.
Yeah.
So what's really captured you during 4.8? What's felt like we've been talking about these kind of mistakes that have come from it, but gameplay wise, what's felt like, kind of jumping ahead in the conversation, but what's felt like a real highlight of the patch?
Well, I think there's a few things. I think the first is counterintuitively, the wipe has really helped because suddenly everyone's back to ground zero. So everyone is like, right, I'm going to be running this. I'm going to be running that. I'm going to be doing some mining so I can build up my blueprints. I'm going to be building up my reputation. And certainly for me, that's like really helped me to go deeper into some of the gameplay loops that I perhaps not touched for so long. So I know wipes are not popular, but undeniably, like that has spurred on some of my motivation for doing things in game. I have really been enjoying experimenting with the new ships. I think they've been quite an interesting mix of new ships this time around. I've also been really enjoying the fact that component crafting has entered the game. I feel like in the previous patches, everybody has been going wild for blueprints and doing blueprint farms for this, that, and the other and crafting their own gear. I feel like maybe I was an outlier in that. I really wasn't bothered by crafting for like personal gear. Didn't interest me in the slightest. I'm not bothered about having the nice P6 or whatever people love to have. But now that ship components are in, I'm like, yes, I am here for that. Like, I want to customize my ship with the stuff that I've built myself. So for me personally, that's good to see in. I've really enjoyed the refueling gameplay. I didn't think I would, because like when I've done refueling with the Starfarer in the past, it was boring and it took ages and it was unreliable. But I quite enjoy these new missions for the refueling. What I also like is that before, we've had the Starfarer in game for years. We've had refueling gameplay in game for years because you could go and refuel player ships with it.
Yeah.
But what's new about this is that you have the ability to pick up a contract and go and do it. And I would love to see that applied to some of the other support game loops, like medical gameplay or even ship tractoring gameplay for those that own an SRV. I think this works and I like it, and I'd like to see it expanded out for more. And then the other one that I've been really enjoying is the tactical strike groups. I like the nature of that. I like the flow of it. I like that it gets a group of people together. So I've been really enjoying that as well.
The tactical strike groups, I've got things to say about that. We'll come back to that. The crafting I want to go to real quick, though, and ask, what components are you focusing on crafting?
Well, I've been working on my hauling reputation because I want to build the big quantum drives first. I do it every time I start flying a ship. I'm like, this needs a better quantum drive in it. I almost think that's like I make these ship review videos on YouTube, and I always think that's a very reliable section where I'm like, yeah, the quantum drive sucks. Change the quantum drive. So for me, I've been working hauling contracts for that. But I've been doing the tactical strike groups for some of the weapons blueprints and the power plant blueprints from those as well. So Yeah.
Power plant and quantum drive's a good call. Yeah, the quantum drives are going to make a difference. Do you think that the different stuff that we're crafting, is it making a big enough difference that people are going to want to actually craft it yet? Or do you still feel like this is, they need to get the other, like, upgrading in and the other tiers before it's really making a difference to the game? Is it worth it for the average person who's listening to this to actually start pursuing crafting?
I actually like this about the crafting system at the moment is it's it's definitely an advantage to use crafted gear with good materials used in it, but it is not like a game-breaking advantage. So for the people that only want to log in for a few hours a week, it is not going to make a massive difference. But for those that are wanting to min-max their ship, it does make enough of a difference that you could say it's worth me doing. And I like that. I feel like that balance is about right for me, where if you want the best equipment, you go and craft it. Um, but if you don't have the time to do that, you are not at a massive disadvantage. So everybody's still playing the same game. And I think that balance feels right for me. What do you think?
I I think it's I think we need to see the other tiers. What I'm not sure of is, are they giving us just the improvements of tier 1 crafting stuff, and we'll see even higher level percentage improvements in tier 2 and tier 3? Or are they showing us all of the improvements that we can see, and eventually these will all be slotted into the 3 tiers? Like the 19% increase that you have, is that 19% representing what we might expect from a tier 3 upgrade? Or is that actually what tier 1 would be? And then tier 3 is up to 30 something percent increase, because then that starts to get into the realm of what you're talking about, where it's like you just can't do anything in the game because everything's scaled for crafted gear. So I'm pretty curious where it goes from here. I think from what I've seen so far, I agree with you. It makes a difference, not so much that you feel forced into it, enough that it feels valuable. But what's bugging me the most about it is how hard it is to collect materials, because there's just no way anybody is going to have all the blueprints and materials of the things they want. It's if they did, then the game's too small. And I think a lot of folks right now are really struggling to figure out a good, reliable way to ask other people for stuff to help them craft things they want. And so, I know I'm always dragging the conversation back to social tools, but it's something that's really, really lacking now with this system.
Yeah, and that's going to make the difference as well for the first point you had, which is if you've got tier 3 stuff that is like way, way better, is that more game breaking? The answer is, in the current form, it probably would be. But if you've got a player marketplace where even somebody who doesn't have the time to spend on finding and sourcing the materials and blueprints and crafting this perfect gear, could potentially just do what they want to do, get the Alpha UEC and buy it from another player, I think that's much more accessible. I mean, there are things like that that kind of exist out of game now, but I think they are less accessible because they're out of game. So yeah, I would love to see more player tools like marketplaces and things like that. But yeah.
I was surprised to see that when you craft a backpack, you can't change like the carrying capacity and stuff. Do you think that's going to be something that changes, or that the things that we're seeing will continue to get different stat adjustments?
I think we'll continue to see different stat adjustments. I think this is still an early implementation of crafting. I think the teams are very likely going to be looking for what works, what doesn't work, what are people crafting, what are people not crafting, how do we incentivize this. And I also think like some of the customization options that I would like to see in crafted gear aren't there yet either. Uh, more choices for how you kind of customize your armor or things like that. One of the things I really like about this patch is they've got these new flight helmets, which are really cool, and they've also got different styles of the flight helmet. I would love to see like more of that, where people can really customize, so that you see the big red helmet with a tomato on it, and you go, I know who that is. That's Space Tomato.
Or a poser.
Or a poser, yeah.
Or a poser. And do you think that you talked about fuel refueling and how that gameplay was pretty interesting to you. How in the world could they take crafting refueling components like nozzles and stuff? Do you think, like, why would you care? I got a blueprint from a refueling nozzle. Why would I care?
You don't at the moment. I think it's the honest truth. Like, I was quite surprised that they were in because it's not something that makes a massive difference, I think. I mean, I haven't done many of the big, like really big fueling contracts, so it might be something that the Starfarer benefits from, but like the Starlight, like I couldn't care less. That said, you get salvage heads for doing the salvage missions. And if you
Love
craft
that.
a good salvage head, it is better, noticeably better than a store-bought one. So I think it just depends on like what you're doing. For me, the nozzles are meh. But for example, if you had the ability to craft fuel tanks and the fuel tanks could carry more fuel, that would actually be a very useful thing. So I think for me, it's just about having something that's relevant to the game loop. That's why I like the salvage heads, because they make salvage better. Again, this is early stage. This is the first patch where we've had these ship components in there for crafting. We don't have everything in there yet. I think there's definitely scope to do more, but I'm happy to see it.
Yeah. Agreed with you there. Do you think that, let's talk about the refueling gameplay. So one of the things they did with this new resurgence and refueling in 4.8 is they simplified it a little bit. You said you've been enjoying it. It's felt a little bit easier to get into and more streamlined than before. Does it feel like they're removing so much that it doesn't feel like it could be a full profession alongside things like mining?
I don't think it's as complicated a profession as mining, but I think that's okay. So for me, the difference between this is it makes it accessible. Before, you only had player-to-player refueling, and it was pretty much a crappy experience for everyone because the person who was stranded had to wait for the refueling ship to get to you. And if you were on the other side of the system, that could be quite a long wait. You had to pay for it, and the person who's traveling doesn't know if they're going to be ambushed by players when they get there, or
Yep.
if the player has like backspaced out because they couldn't be bothered to wait by the time they get there. And it wasn't a great experience. What we have now doesn't massively change what the actual refueling itself gameplay looks like. It just makes it accessible, because if you want to refuel something, you take a contract, you go there, you know that there's going to be somebody there to refuel, you know that it should work, and you can actually go around and live out your dreams as being somebody who flies around topping other people up. So for me, it's not the deepest gameplay loop at the moment. I don't know that it needs to be, in the same way that I don't think hauling needs to be massively more complicated than it is now, and people will still do it. Like load up a box, fly somewhere, unload the box. That's kind of it.
Mm-hmm.
But there'll be people that enjoy that, and refueling for me is enough that there's stuff to do.
Feels like the kind of thing that gets more exciting when you know it's tied into like a dynamic economy. You're going to places to refuel people because you know that fuel's gotten expensive in that star system or something.
Yeah, some of the pyro missions are like 1.8 million.
Yeah. Yeah, they can pay. And you're just refueling like 3 ships, fighting off 2, and then leaving. Getting good money. Yeah,
That's pyro for you.
Yeah. Do you think they're going to go ahead and lower that, and it's just high to try and encourage the testing right now?
Yeah, I think it is all subject to balance, but I think that's fair. Like, they want people to run it and test it and see what works and what doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen the same with mining prices fluctuating. We've seen the same with salvage prices fluctuating. So
Yep.
I think it's natural.
And do you think that this is I guess the big one? Is Star Citizen poised to have its own fuel rats? Is that going to be a thing that can actually form in this game like it did in Elite Dangerous, and people find themselves going around and getting not fame, but like building a reputation, servicing other people, and having a dedicated group to it? Or does it feel long term like this won't be deep enough for that?
I would like to say Yes, but I would also say that's been possible for years because player-to-player refueling has been in game for years. I think the challenge we face in Star Citizen is just the scale and the travel times involved. I think that's probably the biggest challenge for stuff like that. I have to say all credit to the med runners who do that from a medical side of things. It is so impressive what that org does. But that also faces some of the similar challenges of actually being able to cross and travel these long distances to do it. So I would certainly wouldn't rule it out. I think the game mechanics would allow it, but whether or not it plays out with the size of verse, we'd have to see.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that the size and distances, because that's also been a topic coming up lately, especially with CIG kind of talking about the ability to teleport to your party member for dungeons, stuff like that. We won't get into that conversation, but it does just come back around to the idea of the scale in Star Citizen. We know that they have decreased the size of some star systems. They have increased the speed of travel. They've added more places to refuel. But we're also aware that like this new refueling is probably going to make fuel more scarce in the future, so that we do have to focus more on refueling. Places like Pyro and Nyx won't be as easy to fly around in Stanton. We've, I think, had our own disagreements about planet size. But what's your feeling about these travel distances and how the scale of the game is right now? Do you think it should be getting bigger and focusing more on refueling, smaller so that people can get around more, somewhere in between?
I think somewhere in between. Ultimately, scale is one of the things about this game that is most exciting. For those of us that have played for a while, you know, that first time you stepped outside in Port Olisar and looked ahead at Crusade, and you're like, wow, this game is massive. So
Yeah.
the scale is really, really important for Star Citizen. There is definitely an interplay between accessibility and being able to get around. For me, I think scale does play a part in that. So I think it should be much easier to run out of fuel in Pyro than it should be in Stanton. At the moment, I think the balance we've got on that is very generous. Most ships can fly around Pyro without having to worry. I do think it ends up like being, I would like to see it a bit more like the middle of Australia, for example, where there's like nothing for miles around and you have to plan your journey carefully. I would love to have Pyro feel a bit more like that,
Mm-hmm.
whereas Stanton might be, yeah, there's a gas station around every corner, don't worry about it kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think there are lots of directions you can take it, and I think we will have enough between having the 5-star systems for 1.0. There'll be enough there that you could have that variety and still have the scale, but also some of the scarcity.
I concur.
Well, there
Let's
we
talk
are.
about DefenseCon. 4.8 has been an interesting patch. It's been rough, and I don't mean to discredit people who have not been able to enjoy it or have a good time, but I have genuinely enjoyed Star Citizen more than ever before. Pursuing blueprints, taking tactical strike groups, doing some refueling, finding minerals to help with crafting. It's definitely far from perfect, but I feel like I've finally found actual things to pursue in the game, and it's not just like I'm gonna just go run another contract because that's the content. I remember years ago when I was just banging my head against running mercenary missions in bunkers, not for any sort of reputation, not for any sort of progress, just so you could like go and shoot people and make some money, and that's what there was to do. And this is the first patch I feel like I've been able to really pursue something and set goals and try to unlock them. But DefenseCon itself was pretty difficult from a standpoint of the store not working for a lot of people, not delivering the things that they had purchased. The game itself giving people a lot of login problems. Just like there was a kind of a cascade of issues that we've touched on throughout the day today. But do you think that the overall delivery of DefenseCon, I asked you earlier, I think, if they were going to move on or not, do you think this kind of thing really hurts the company long term, or is it kind of just a blip?
I would hope it's just a blip because ultimately people are going to, in 5 years' time, if you say to people, "Do you remember what happened in DefenseCon 2956?" They're probably like, "No." Um, but if you say to people, "Do you know about the Ironclad?" They'll probably like, "Oh yeah, I know the Ironclad. Yes, I like that ship." So I think it will probably be a blip. I think as long as it is just a blip, I think people will move on. Um, Ultimately, I think particularly for the past year or so, the relative stability of the game has probably been what's really encouraged people to treat it more like a game and less like an alpha. Um, I think as long as that stability isn't marred for a long period of time, I think people will just move on. Um, but it's one of those where time will tell. Like if people had a bad experience at the start of DefenseCon, it is easy to say, well, that was like a couple of days when things were bad. If people are still having a bad experience in 2, 3, 4 weeks' time, that suddenly becomes something that people remember, like the 318 atrocities.
Yeah. I mean, 318 is an update that's constantly being brought up in context of this one. It's also possible when people ask, "Do you remember the Ironclad?" Folks are like, "Yeah, do you remember how it released?"
And the key is going to be whether people say, "Yes, I remember," or "No, I don't remember that." Isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Besides, I'm trying to get to the crux of DefenseCon. Besides finances, what dictates it as a success? Is it the amount of people who went on and streamed the game? Is it the folks who signed up and made new accounts? Is it the amount of noise it made in the general like journalism around the industry? Or is it just the happiness of the community? Because money wise, obviously they can point to it and say that it was great for funding. I'm trying to understand what is the balance of people who actually enjoyed themselves these last couple weeks.
Yeah, and I think there will probably be some metrics that probably within CIG they use things like, well, sales numbers, things like player concurrency is probably going to be a big one. I think those will probably be the primary metric drivers. I think for me, interestingly about this patch, and it'd be interesting to know if your experience has been the same from interacting with people on stream and within the GII, but um, most of the people I've been playing with have been playing a lot more on these past couple of weeks, and it's nothing to do with DefenseCon. I don't know how many people actually went to the show floor at DefenseCon. I think what's got people playing has been the wipe, it's been the new content, and it's been the new ships. So almost the fact that DefenseCon was happening is like something along the side. Like they could have had anything or
Yeah.
nothing, and probably a lot of that momentum would still have carried.
I think you're right. I think the wipe, it's easy to forget how much that motivates people to start again. A lot of folks are thinking, well, there was a wipe, there's going to be another wipe. But I think the majority of us are like, there's a wipe. We're going to be on this set for a little while. And it's fun to kind of start building things up again.
Yep, I need my credits, I need my rep, I need to unlock missions, I need to unlock ships.
Yeah.
It definitely gives a motivation.
Yeah. And I'm glad they did it at this time. Needing to find blueprints and then also juggling making enough money in the meantime and also juggling finding materials. It gives me almost 3 separate parts of the game that I'm focused on. I am gathering resources, whether through crafting or looting or mining. I am finding blueprints through doing content. And then I'm also like trying to fund all of the things I need to do that by grinding to make money so that I can supply ships with stuff. And it feels like it feels good.
Definitely. And the other thing that I've seen evidence of on Reddit and on Twitter and things like that is that bad actors are being banned from the game. So people who are abusing in-game mechanics for to try and ruin the economy are being actively removed from the player base, because that was one of the big problems that we saw towards the latter patches of where we were before this one.
Yeah.
Was that there was so much money floating around that it almost became meaningless.
Oh my
Like you
God.
could see somebody begging in chat, "Oh, can anybody send me some money so I can buy my Aurora?" And they'd like get sent 1 billion credits or something because somebody needed to actually get rid of some credits because their wallet was so full that it was bugged.
Yeah.
Is a crazy state of affairs. So the fact that we've had the wipe, which resets things, but that it seems to me that CIG are taking steps to remove some of those bad actors that were responsible for that hyperinflation, is also positive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been good. And then there's the big elephant in the room of DefenseCon, actually truly large, I think almost 750 meter large elephant that goes by the name of Odin. Very powerful elephant. CID released a $5,000 picture. What are your thoughts on that? We haven't gotten to talk about this yet.
I mean, I remember when they released a $1,000 picture, and that was really getting people up in arms. And then they released a $2,500 picture, and that really got people going. I am not surprised at all. I think I said I expected Odin to be 5K. I think it sounds wild. It sounds unreal. But if you said CIG has released a ship that they expect 40 people to crew, and the price for it is $125 per person. I don't know if my maths is right there, but you know, that doesn't sound quite so wild. So I think for me, it all hangs on whether that crew count is going to be encouraged, enforced, or abandoned. The Odin is a very cool looking ship. I, like most other Star Citizen backers, see a big ship and go, "Wow, that's cool." Yeah, big guns. You've got a little turret with all of the shells around it and like a circle around. You've got that big hangar bay. You've got the quiet room when it all just gets too much. You've got the
That's
hospital.
so funny.
You got the hospital with the morgue next to it because I guess the doctors aren't very good. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like it is a very cool ship.
Why
The
is there a
key thing
morgue
is-
on the ship?
Exactly right. Exactly. The key thing for me is like, is the Odin going to be the pinnacle of multi-crew gameplay? Is it going to be the Star Citizen equivalent of a World of Warcraft raid, which is what they said on the Star Citizen Live Not Live? Or is the Odin going to be the latest solo Idris, where somebody flies around with a size 12 laser going, a size 12 laser? The answer to that question is going to be key for me.
Well, why do you think they gave the pilot weapons?
I think it's a bad design choice. I think it is probably a very good sales choice, but I think it's a bad design choice.
Do you think that makes a difference? People buying it to be a solo ship?
I think it really, really does. And to be fair, I think they've been very clear in all of the sales material. This is not a solo ship. But also, I think a lot of people that spend this money on these kind of ships, they don't see themselves as part of the crew. I think if you own a ship, the assumption is that you're going to be in the pilot's chair. And so I think a lot of that stems from, well, the person who actually spent the 5K is going to be in the pilot's chair. So we want them to feel like they're doing stuff. And so we'll give them a big laser. I think that's part of the reason why we saw success of the Idris weapons kits. It's why people like the Tiburon. It's, I think, part of the reason why people like the Odin. It's probably part of the reason why Polaris owners feel very shortchanged. But I think it's unfortunate for me. I can see why they've done it that way, but also they didn't have to. For a ship like this, if you said to me, what do you want to do on an Odin? Well, I would say chief engineer because I'm a nerd. But actually, I think the most popular thing, the most fun thing for most people to do on the Odin will be to be in one of those triple size 12 turrets, the top one or the bottom one.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm on a Perseus, I would much rather be in the gun turret than in the pilot's chair. So I think it's unfortunate. I think it's a missed opportunity to say we're moving away from pilot controlled lasers, but they couldn't really do that with the Tiburon release either. So
I think that they're being very. Maybe it is all about the sales, and that's very disappointing. But I think it's very short sighted to continue to focus on the idea that piloting the ship is the main thing people want to do. I know that this game started out as a spaceship flying game, but I've always been adamant in saying I am not the kind of person who wants to fly a spaceship. And I know a ton of people who joined Star Citizen not because they came from Jedi Starfighter or Elite Dangerous or even Wing Commander, but because they came from other sci-fi games where you're going around looting, crafting, exploring, surviving, and they just don't care about flying a big ship. They want to be on the ship. They want to be doing the things that you could never do in other sci-fi games, which was repairing a ship because it's on fire during a battle, or scanning down a derelict from the scanning suite in a nice exploration ship. And I think this obsession with making sure that people feel satiated by their combat needs, to putting random weapons in control for pilots, it's just weird to me.
yeah,
it still
I
comes
also
off as very
think
combat focus.
yeah, I also think there's a time and place for it. So in defense of the way that works, the one seat you have to have filled on any ship realistically is the pilot seat. So you could argue that you could have an engineer filled sometimes, but if you don't have it filled, everything will still work. You can argue that you don't have to fill all of the turrets and many ships will still work. But you need somebody flying the ship. So in defense of stuff for pilots to do, I think that is always a consideration. But for me, I think there's also an argument that says it's potentially suboptimal to the running of the ship, because any pilot who has access to a massive railgun or a massive laser is going to want to be firing the massive railgun or the massive laser, right?
Yeah.
That's going to be a natural urge that they feel. But in doing so, they're always going to be facing the front shield towards the target. If I put my fleet captain nerd hat on, that might not always be optimal. You want to actually spread some of that shield damage around your ship, which is why it's one of the reasons why I really like one of the best ships that will be in game, the Javelin class destroyer. At the risk of getting too into why I like the Javelin, the pilot doesn't, as far as I know, control anything other than flying the ship, which is really important. But the Javelin main armament is primarily a set of ship-to-ship turrets on the rear, and they've got wide angles. So if you're working as part of a crew and part of a team, part of the pilot's role is going to be maneuvering the ship in such a way that the weapons can be brought to bear, but also that you've got strong defenses in place.
Mm-hmm.
The Odin seems set up very differently to that. So the Javelin has got these big things at the back. It's got these broadside turrets, which are kind of secondary armament. It does have these big torpedoes at the front, but generally speaking, like, I think maneuver is going to be a really important part of how a team works together to run a Javelin. I think for an Odin, as far as I can see, you point front towards enemy, and that's it. Like, you don't have those interesting, like, how do you manage your angles and things like that. So I think personally it is a missed opportunity. I can see why they've gone down that route, and also it does look really cool. So I'm willing to give it a pass because it looks so cool.
I think the nature of the ship is not tied to how good it looks, though. I think that they can make basically anything look really good now. And that wasn't so much based around the weapons and the armament that it had. It sounds almost like a philosophical change, though, in the way that they're building capital ships. Would you say it is?
I don't know. It's one ship, so it's difficult to know. I think the much more interesting design choice would be, so when you watch the SCL and they talk about some of the influences on the design, they talked about the Zumwalt destroyer. They talked around some of the historic battleships. Historic battleships are really interesting to look at because they had balance considerations, and not like game balance considerations, but actual balance. If you put all of the weapons on the front of a battleship, the front of it would tip over in the water and it would sink. So you actually had to have turrets on the front and something on the back, usually other turrets to balance it out, which is why many battleships you see, they might have an extra turret to the front than the rear, but many actually have an equal number. And I think from a Star Citizen perspective, that would be much more interesting, because as soon as you have to turn broadside, you also paint a bigger target for yourself, which makes for much more interesting tactical decisions. I don't see a lot of that for the Odin. I think the hardest thing is going to be keep the nose pointed to the enemy, and that's all you have to think about. I think it would have been much more interesting to have a more loaded weapon set. You don't have to worry about the pilot having the armament, because the pilot's job is to get the turrets in a position to fire. And for me, that's much more interested than stay on target, stay on target.
Yeah. One could argue that if a pilot is in a position where they're already using weapons as well on the other ship, then maybe Star Citizen has not built an interesting enough structure for capital pilots. Like, there's not enough skill required to just pilot the ship that you feel bored and you need to be shooting something as well.
Absolutely. And that's the distinction that I would draw as well, that you said, capital pilots. For me, a capital ship is all about positioning. It's about getting into the optimal position. And that should be the hard part for a pilot, because these things are huge. They're going to be slow to turn. They're going to be slow to maneuver. So anticipating, planning, and maneuvering precisely is like, it could be a skill in itself. In much smaller ships, I absolutely see the role of a pilot in having multiple functions, because that's basically what a fighter pilot is anyway, right? They have every function on the ship in a single-seater fighter, and they're just all simplified. So I think the higher up the ship list you go, the more I would take away the other stuff from the pilot and say, actually, this is a dedicated role on the ship. You don't need to worry about managing power now, because your ship has an engineer. You don't need to worry about repairs now, because your ship engineer is going to take care of that. You don't need to worry about where the turrets are pointing, because your turret gunners are going to do that. You just need to position the ship. But, I can also understand that there'll be many people out there who would say, well, that makes the pilot a boring job. For me, that makes a pilot a specialized job that you have to be very good at and coordinate and work as a team. But yeah, it is what it is.
I mean, these all should be boring to someone. The amount of times people will sit on the stream and watch me move boxes and be like, you find this fun? Like, yeah, some people like this. Some people find it boring. I think the same should be true for piloting here. We talk about how you've got ships that are going to have control surfaces, and some will be able to fly through atmosphere better than others. Some will have VTOL and be able to hover. Some can't even land. And then we got storms, we got clouds, there's weather coming in. You've got the mass of your ship needs to be accounted for, the way your thrusters are working, the wear and tear on them, all this stuff. It wouldn't feel great to have all these variables and then have piloting still be as simple as, well, yeah, anybody can just pick up any ship and fly it around. I think they're
point front towards enemy.
Yeah, I think, just in the same way that you got to get a different license for a different type of vehicle to drive around on the roads here, it should legitimately be like, if you're used to flying that sort of anywhere from maybe an Arrow up to like a Zeus, or even a little bit bigger, the Corsair, like, yeah, you can kind of get around with that. It feels mostly the same. But once you get into bigger ships than that, I really do feel like it should be something that makes a new coming player step back and be like, wait, I can't do this. I'm going to mess something up. Like, this ship sounds like it's going to have problems. I sound like I'm going to break something. I can't figure out how to even get off the ground. Personally, I think that's where they should be going with large ship piloting.
I would like to see that as well. But I think the Odin doesn't seem to be going in that direction.
Do you think that this presents an issue when it comes to power creep? Because, as you said, the Javelin has some very strict balancing things going on. And that's the biggest ship in the game already. This thing comes in. Does this now kind of call for CIG to keep making ships of this size, or to upgun the Javelin to make it feel a little bit more capable?
I, 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 I don't think so. It will all depend in how it's balanced. So the only thing that I saw about the Odin that I thought was overpowered is the torpedo armament. So to my mind, if those had been maybe size 10 or size 9 torpedoes, that would have made much more sense. Like right now, it's got literally the biggest in everything you can imagine. Um, I think if it had slightly smaller torpedoes, it would have given a complementary anti-capital roll to a Polaris and a Javelin, because suddenly they bring something to the table that the Odin wouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
All the rest of it, I think, makes sense for me for a battle cruiser. Like you've got the biggest guns and stuff like that. The balancing for me is going to be in how hard CIG want to go on crew count and how hard they want to go on running costs. So at its worst, the Odin could be the next solo Idris. At its best, it could be something that is incredibly powerful, but has to be used very carefully and with a big crew, because it's very hard to run and very expensive. And that for me is okay, right? Because if you've got 40 people working together to run this thing, like it should be very powerful. I think the other complication which affects the Odin and the Javelin is this whole more than 2 shield generators thing. Personally, I'd much like to see like localized shield generators which cover part of the ship, which would give a benefit to being able to run more shield generators, but also another plan of attack for people attacking those ships. But in terms of like the Idris, the Javelin, the Polaris, like the Idris is much, much smaller than the Odin. And we've seen in the verse right now, it gives general utility. The Javelin, which is my favorite ship, I think is the sweet spot between big and small. So the Javelin has these broadside turrets, they're kind of secondary turrets, as it were, and they switch between size 7 and size 4, a bit like the Perseus guns that have those kind of 2 modes. For me, that makes the Javelin...
The gun from the Squadron.
Yeah, exactly.
Really,
exactly. Yeah. And for me, that makes it able to engage bigger targets, not capital targets necessarily, but bigger targets, but also small fighters that are flying around. Right. The Odin is exclusively big guns and then a few PDCs. So to me, like the balancing factor could be kind of heavier fighters shouldn't really feel that threatened by the Odin itself, because especially if you don't have to worry about the PDCs, the big guns are very unlikely to hit you if you're in something quick. And that's why it's going to be important that the Odin is carrying fighters or running some of these other ships as escorts to stop these things from being a threat.
Right.
And I think the other balancing factor is crew count. So in an ideal world, a properly run Idris should be up to 10 people, I think. I think in an ideal world, a properly run Javelin should be about 20 people, and then a properly run Odin would be 30 to 40. At the moment, the game really doesn't enforce that, and you can often run these ships with a skeleton crew, hence the whole thing about the solo Idris. But that is a decision that could be very quickly and easily reversed.
Yeah.
And if the game chooses to enforce those limits, it gives a natural reason why you should choose some ships for some situations. To me, I really hope the game does enforce those limits. Maybe not now, but at a stage when it makes sense, because then capital ships become that multi-crew experience. There are plenty of ships out there for solo players. For me, the capital ships are like the end game group content.
Yeah.
And that would be the key balancing factor. If I think about all the events that I've run with my org this year, we would struggle to fully crew an Odin. We could probably just about do it on our best attended events, but we wouldn't be doing it every day. And that becomes the balancing factor. It's something you bring out when you can get together 30, 40 people.
Yeah.
I also know that's not a popular opinion. And there are lots of people out there who say, I should be able to log in and just go in my Odin by myself and fire the laser. So I accept that I'm not in the majority there.
I know this is a debate that's going to keep raging until the game comes out. But I do think that you're in the majority. I think that most people are willing to accept that a larger thing should require more people. The difficulty is how the game translates that to you. We've been talking about deterrence and difficulties of things and how they should work. Even the fact that like CIG sold this Odin with the ability to fire those lasers, it's like talking out of both sides of your mouth, right? You're telling people this is not a solo capable ship, but also you could fire the laser while you're flying. And it comes down to whether or not CIG puts in text on a guide somewhere saying you cannot control this ship as a solo player. Or if they let people find out over time that if you were flying the Odin and you were using the laser, like you said, all that fire is coming at your front shield and you blow up eventually. It's not like the game is saying you can't do it, but the game session sucks because of it. And the game itself is going to have, a certain level of times that you need to get into a crappy situation from making a crappy decision before it has really cemented in your head that that's not how things should be done. And I wonder where they're going to land on the scale of doing that for capital ships. We've talked about things like control surfaces. We have special ships like the Ares that can get around those bigger turrets to take out these larger ships. We've got interdiction capabilities, E-War, like EMPs and stuff. You could probably hack into these ships to some extent to open doors and shut down engineering and stuff. Flak cannons. So the capital ships in Star Citizen have had all these deterrents listed out to us and these things, even shield emitters. That's something that they mentioned in Squadron 42. And I think that they're probably going to use the Kingship as a way to test and balance for the Odin to be able to be in game, because you have to blow up shield emitters and then get to all the stuff. There's all the kind of stuff they've talked about, but they have resisted putting it into the game. Even engineering, we can all tell, is kind of scaled back, so it's not forcing people too much to play a certain way with these larger ships. But what do you think they're waiting for to actually start working these deterrents into the game and making people second guess taking out that Corsair versus just the 135C or something?
I mean, I think they're probably waiting for some kind of inflection point that forces them to do it. Like right now, they're able to run in this ambiguous situation where they've got all these game features like engineering and such like, but also that in many situations people can just take out a solo capital. I think they would get a lot of pushback from people who've spent a lot of money if they started enforcing some of these gameplay decisions. Conversely, I think they would get a lot of flack if they came out and said, no, solo Idris is a thing. It's always going to be a thing. We're quite comfortable with single person firing the laser and destroying everything. So I think at the moment, it's not really in their interests to come down hard on either side of that debate, because right now, the big spenders be spending and everybody else is not really kicking off, because you're able to say, well, it's not going to be like this eventually. At some point, there's going to be some kind of inflection point which says, and it might even be as late as 1.0, which says, this is the way we're going to balance. For me, I would hope that player count is a really logical way to balance out these things. 40 players should be able to compete with 40 players, whether that's 40 players in a single Odin, or it's 40 players with a selection of single-seater fighters and Ares and bombers and the like. That for me is a really interesting scenario where you've not necessarily got like for like. It becomes about how you manage that engagement. That for me is why I would want multi-crew to be enforced on these big ships, because then you don't have to worry about balance. Yes, it is absolutely okay that an Idris is more powerful than a single-seater fighter because you've got 15 people on the Idris. But 15 single-seater fighters might be an equal match for an Idris because it's 15 versus 15. So for me, like I do hope that's where we get to with this thing, because then the whole power creep becomes less of a thing and it's more about how many people are involved in the fight and how well do they fight. I think the other thing is that there are always options for rock, paper, scissors combat. So what I mean by that is one ship is not necessarily always going to win. It's going to have strengths and weaknesses. So, for example, they might say of the Odin, yeah, it's super powerful at shooting to the front. It's got these two great big triple turrets. It's got the pilot laser beams. So whatever's in front of it needs to be worried. But also, like, maybe it's really vulnerable to the back from torpedoes because it doesn't have good PDC coverage. So if someone can get behind it, the pilot's going to have a difficult choice about maybe stop firing that laser so you can turn so the PDCs can engage. So there are potentially other ways that you can balance these ships in alternative scenarios or with kind of rock, paper, scissors mechanics as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny that they, like you said, they're just at this point where they're promising abilities while also saying there's going to be restrictions, and everybody is kind of buying in based on what they believe it's going to be. And it's kind of indicative of Star Citizen overall, right? Like, this has always been this dream that Chris has to make this game, but that dream is being pulled in different directions by influences, internal, external, things they can't control, things that maybe they didn't expect. And we're all just kind of along the ride, hoping that it turns out into whatever it is that we've seen through their communications. And this is a big one. I'm very interested in seeing how it lands on the community long term.
It'll be interesting to see, but I think the direction of travel will go the way of some of the other ships. So, for example, if the decision is made that the person who fires the spinal mount weapon on the Idris is no longer going to be the pilot, it's going to be the co-pilot, suddenly, like, that very drastically changes the landscape, because you've got two people who have to work together. In my mind, that's the point of these big ships, is to get people working together.
Mm-hmm.
But also, like, you've suddenly raised the crew minimum from 1 to 2. Because a solo pilot isn't going to do anything. And I would love to see more things like that. I actually quite like the Polaris for that, because it's not just a solo ship win. It's, you can have 2, 3, 4, 5 people working together, and the more people you add, the more effective the ship is. I think that would be a quick win as far as I'm concerned for the Idris, is you take that away from the pilot, you give it to the co-pilot. I think it will be very divisive in the community to do that. So I can understand why it hasn't happened.
Gonna have to bite that at some point, CIG. You can't keep having your cake and eating it too.
Yeah, but in their defense, I don't know that now is the right time to bite that bullet. Like, they've got the best of both worlds right now.
It's just, but it just doesn't come off as good business to me. It comes off as stringing people along in a game that's not made for them. And I think this is a big problem Star Citizen has. It's like, they continue to advertise in certain ways that are attracting people to the game, while also not telling them that there are things in this game that will drag down the experience they might not be looking for. A lot of folks want to get into a game that looks like it's a cool, get in your spaceship and go fly and fight other people, without realizing that if they do that and then die, they might spawn in another star system. They have to get their stuff back. They've just lost all of that armament. Maybe they're looking for something that's more akin to Elite Dangerous, but because CIG doesn't actually tell people straight up, hey, this stuff's going to happen, you get people like, a change comes up and they're like, why the heck have I been playing this for 2 years if it's going to go that way?
I mean, yeah, but you could also make the argument that people probably know that these things are likely to change. Like, from any given patch to another, from any given patch to another, there is a meta ship that everybody seems to be flying. Like, for a long time, everybody flew an Arrow. Like, it is not like in the end game, the Arrow is definitely promised to be, this is going to be the best ship. It's just, this is the best situation for now. You could make the argument that it's always been very clear that these ships are supposed to be multi-crew ships. And conversely, you could make the argument that CIG has always said something NPC, something flight blade, right? So, like, there is enough ambiguity that you could make a good faith argument that these are always supposed to be solo ships, or that these were never supposed to be solo ships.
And that's a problem.
I think the challenge is, like, I don't think CIG truly knows the answer to that question, because I think the design has, like, changed and fluctuated, and some of it is like at the whims of what Chris Roberts said on any given moment. Like this whole thing about the battlecruiser, I remember when it was said that when the Javelin was released, like, don't worry, this is the biggest player-owned warship we're releasing. And then this battlecruiser thing came out, and I'm fine with it because I love the concept. But like, you could easily make the case that actually they've promised multiple other ships in the stretch goals. So you could turn out and say, actually, we also promised this, we also promised that, we also promised the other. They weren't necessarily promised to be player purchasable for real cash. So I think the scope of the game changes, the scale of the game changes. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's bad faith on CIG's part. I truly don't think there are many people in CIG that are confident to a high degree of exactly how this will play out. Will NPC crew end up being a thing? Will it not? Will flight blades end up being a thing? Will it not? It's been said that NPC crew will happen, but it might happen at some time after 1.0 because it's really complicated and we can't figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. And then you've got the balance considerations, because suddenly 40 people versus one person in Odin with NPC crew is very unbalanced. Is that power creep? Is that the design we want for our game? Difficult question. So I think it's understandable that they're kicking the can down the road. My hope is that most people that are spending this kind of money, which is crazy money to spend on a video game, it is crazy money.
Yeah.
My hope is that most people that are spending it play the game and enjoy playing the game, and that if their dreams of being a solo Idris pilot doesn't work out, they can melt it and buy stuff that they enjoy flying, is my hope.
I think you've got a lot of expectations for the folks buying stuff. I personally think that most of the people who are buying ships for Star Citizen are not aware of even 60% of the things that CIG wants to do with them. I mean, even just control surfaces is something that I think, as somebody who's been covering this very, very deeply, you also know plenty about control surfaces. Do you know how much it's actually going to make it difficult for people without VTOL thrusters to hover in atmosphere?
Well, it's going to depend on the ship, though.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. Like, some people have spent hundreds of dollars on ships that they're going to go and hover over some outpost and very well might incur damage and be like, why am I getting damaged? I don't want this. And they don't know because it's not obvious. And I think that kind of same thing will happen for so many different features, from Maelstrom to hacking to scanning. And I think that CIG has a serious, maybe it's not a serious problem. Maybe this is the kind of thing that they just weather over time as they slowly introduce more and more of these small things. But I do think that there are a lot of folks who don't understand where these ships are headed long term.
Yeah, and I think there's some element to that. But I also think that somebody that likes the game will get over that. So I think I know the answer to this question. What was the ship that you first bought for Star Citizen?
325A.
That's what I thought. That was the same for me, by the way.
Yeah.
Do you still have it?
No.
Oh, is that because it didn't turn out the way that you thought it was going to turn out?
Yes.
Right. So you didn't refund the game and stop playing. You still like the game.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think there'll be many people that are in that boat. I think, to their credit, and this is fuzzied a little bit by the whole war bond situation, but to their credit, Star Citizen has for a long time offered this whole thing where you can melt your ship, you get the value of it back, and you can put that towards a different ship. So I think in many cases, that's what people will do. If a ship doesn't turn out the way they thought it would, they can kind of say, do you know what? I still like the game, so I'm going to switch ship.
Yeah.
The interesting thing for me, like, if it's easy to make that argument of saying, like, people have certain expectations. The first wave of Odins sold out in no time at all. There is zero way that anybody that bought in that first wave of Odins had proper time to even read through the description of what that ship concept was supposed to offer. They saw Odin, they saw $5,000, they saw the buy button, and they pressed it, right? Yeah. So, like, I think, you know, there is a good faith argument to be made around the fact that people's expectations change, the company's expectations change, and there's maybe more that could be done around communicating clearly. But also, some people just buy big spaceships and worry about that later.
Yeah, I think that it is. I think it's in the success is in spite of that, though. I think that it is problematic to rely on the idea that people can buy something, have a problem with it, and then exchange it. I think that's a great policy, and I appreciate that it exists. But I think that allowing yourself to get comfortable with that gives you way more room to mess up. And it still has an effect, right? Even if people are trading in ships and getting different value for something else, they are still having to go back on a decision that they made. And that psychologically has an effect on people over time. I also think that I, and maybe other people in the community, have Star Citizen induced brain damage, and that I'm able to put up a little bit more with their stuff than, this is something I said in the video I just put out. The people they're marketing to are just not going to be in the same mindset. You know, they're trying to go out to the conventions and just get random people who are walking around. And I think that it's just it's a different kind of thing than what most people are used to.
It is, but I also think by the time that they're really mass marketing, like, some of these questions will be settled.
I hope so.
I think we're starting to see more of that vision for what is expected from 1.0. I think some of these questions are going to have to put to bed before then. Like, and for the longest time, we didn't even know what LTI meant, right? I remember before, what was it, 2954 SitCon that they had that session? Like, there was so much debate about what exactly is insurance. What does it mean when it says 2 years, 10 years, LTI? And I think even now, like, that's open to change in the future. But, you know, I think some of these things are very complicated design questions, and it would be nice to say this is exactly how it's going to turn out. But 1.0 isn't just around the corner; it's still a while away. A lot of this is going to change. So, I think to some extent it makes sense keeping it open. I think. I mean, we always hear it with the PvP versus PvE debate, right?
My favorite.
And again, the classic. And people will dig out these interviews from Chris Roberts where it's like, oh yeah, there'll just be like a PvP slider and you can just choose how much that you want or don't want. And maybe they'll just be like your own PvE service and stuff. Like, there's so much that has been said. And the way I view that is, this is all like exposition of the thought process going behind it and trying to determine the best way forward for the game, rather than well, Chris Roberts said there will be PvP sliders. I can't find it in the menu anywhere, but it must be coming next patch, right? Like, I think the complexity of the game, the size of it, means a lot of this stuff is going to have to change. And I wouldn't necessarily expect CIG to have all of the answers now. And now isn't necessarily also the right time to land down hard on one set or the other.
It's certainly giving energy that, like, this, we're so still deep in on Star Citizen. The 2027-28 figure that he gave for that release is, I think, it's laughable at this point. And I think it's probably time to update our visions a little bit. I don't remember if it was last year or the year before. Somebody said I was being dramatic for saying that 1.0 is a ways away. It's very clear that 1.0 from a design standpoint is still a ways away. And I certainly hope they can do it. But all of this really, to me, explains why you can develop a game as long as you need to, I'm all here for it. Like, develop, iterate, keep going. But we are definitely seeing a lot of smaller, less direct complications of what happens when you develop a game for a long time. And I honestly find it equally as interesting as the development itself.
Definitely. I definitely think so. And the other thing that's interesting to me is, like, I mean, Star Citizen looks good, but relatively it doesn't look as good as it used to, in that, like, the first few times I stepped in engine, like, it was so much better than anything else out there. Now it looks good, but, like, graphically, is it that much better than everything else? I mean, it's good, but so I think it's interesting. Like, if you'd said to me 10 years ago, like, what's the reasons for backing Star Citizen, I'd have the usual stuff, like, the vision and stuff like that. And I'd also say it is unashamedly a PC game, and, like, it is the cutting edge of graphics. Like, you will not see stuff out there that is better. Now, for me, that's probably not one of the reasons I'd say to play Star Citizen. And that's just because it's been in development for so long. So some of the stuff that was cutting edge is now a bit dated in some areas.
Do you think they can get back to that? I still view CIG as like a tech company. I feel like they should be at the cutting edge. Do you think that they still can?
Well, I still think they are at the cutting edge. It's just no longer like graphics engine. I think it's some of the other tech that they've got going on that is cutting edge. I think it is easily rescuable. We've seen it in some of the second passes they've taken on some of the ships that were looking a little bit old. The new ones are looking very good. I think it is not it's easy for them to kind of do that and update things. But it's just interesting for me that, like, the things that I would say are the best things about the game are probably quite different now from 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Let's wrap this show up by talking a little bit about what I was saying with the long development time and all that stuff. With probably the biggest rumor coming about right now, I think it makes sense with the timing. DefenseCon has passed. $1 billion raised is passed. Summer Games Fest is coming up. There's only 6 months left in the year. Squadron 42 still doesn't have a release date for this year. Do you think that it is being passed into 2027 at this point?
I don't know.
Good answer.
I made this a topic of one of my exposition videos in March. I was like, it's 2026. At that point, it was quarter of the way through 2026. Everybody is still saying, yes, 2026 release. And that still seems to be the official line, albeit the wording has changed to, we're still aiming for 2026, which
they're
is
not even
very
saying
subtle.
that anymore. They're not saying the year anymore. Now they're just saying we're close.
Yeah. Well, I think they are close. And I think my gut feel is, there's probably two things at play here. I think the first is, Chris Roberts is a perfectionist. He will want an incredible experience. It's one of the reasons why people are so excited about Squadron and Star Citizen, but it's also an Achilles heel to release dates, because he's like, oh, well, if we're able to do this, and we can add this back in. I think there will be an element of, like, as you go through all these polished phases, Chris's vision will sometimes impose itself on what's going on. I also think if they wanted to release this year, they probably could. From everything that I hear about, like, where Squadron is supposed to be at, and from all the stuff we've seen, even go back 2 years to SitCon and the demo that we saw there, I think it's probably safe to say if they wanted to push hard for a release this year, it could be done. I think the reason that they wouldn't is probably what's going on in the wider marketplace. If they launch,
here it comes.
If they launch when GTA launches,
he said it.
Everybody is going to be obsessed with it, right? Yeah. It just is. It just is. I think that from a business perspective, CIG are probably hoping to reach people with Squadron 42 that they wouldn't reach with Star Citizen, people that maybe aren't aware of it. I think the market for Squadron is very different from the market for Star Citizen. And for that reason, I think they'll be reliant on having a decent amount of marketing exposure. This is I don't know what you want to call it. I've got into trouble in the past for calling it a AAA title, but this is a big budget title. It has A-list actors in it that people will recognize. It will be cinematic. It will be story driven. It will be very cool. I think where Star Citizen is like very, very detailed. I think you have to know quite a lot to get into Star Citizen and really get the most out of it. I think Squadron 42 will be easier to like dip your toe in and then follow the story through. So I think the market for it is going to be much bigger. And I think the team are right to be concerned about what else is occupying headspace. If they release at a time when everybody is just talking about something else, it's going to be very difficult for them to get that reach. The challenge for me is there's no guarantee that GTA is going to be released in November this year.
Yeah.
And
well, yeah. I think if
it's
they
like
were
a complicated game of like 3D chess of like, are they going to go? Are they not going to go? Shall I go? Or are they not going to go?
Yeah.
And the problem is if that is the rationale behind this delay, if it's not that the game isn't ready, if it's that we think we could be ready, but we don't want to lose the exposure, that kind of makes sense from a business perspective. Don't get me wrong, I want to play this game. I'm excited for Squadron. I want it like now, but I can understand that from a business perspective. The challenge will be is if GTA turn around and say, "Oh yeah, we're delaying our release again," as often happens with so many other games. By the way, that's not unusual. Then what does CIG do? Oh well, we'll have to push back Squadron even further. It's not a good way to like manage a release cycle. I think it'd be much better to have the flexibility to commit. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think probably September is the latest. August, September time is the latest we could know if it was going to release this year. If we haven't heard anything by September, chances are it probably isn't, and we should hear some kind of announcement that it isn't.
I mean, yeah, I'm definitely, Summer Games Fest is exactly 4 months prior to the first week of October, which I think is about as late as they can be. And
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think everybody's got a different timeline as to what they think the marketing campaign could be. But I think if they wait any longer than this, like they're really running into the thing with this. The big argument I've seen some people make it on Twitter, on Reddit, in streams, but it keeps needing to be explained that Squadron 42 players and GTA 6 players are not necessarily the same people, but the people who are going on YouTube or TV or browsing the internet or going on Reddit are seeing the same or at least similar ads. They're being given ads based on the same kinds of dollars from people. And when GTA is coming out, we've also got a new Halo coming out, Campaign Evolved. You got a new Gears of War coming out. You've got the new Star Wars racing game coming out, the pod racing game. There's probably some other games that haven't been announced, all coming out in that third and fourth quarter. It gets more crowded, even if it's not because of those games. Advertising costs go up because of that, and I do think that it's just not something you want to deal with. Like, why would you want to release a trailer just to get compared to the biggest game of the year every single time? And it makes sense to delay it, but it's frustrating that it wasn't. It was not scheduled before the end of the year rather than at the end. I get it. Yeah. Don't release in Q4 if GTA 6 is coming out, but it would have been great if the game was just already slated for August or September.
Yeah, and my hope is that CIG are being smart about this and are being agile. I mean, the way I explain the whole share of mind thing is, like, even if you say GTA 6 and Squadron 42 are for different audiences, if you've got a billboard, it can only have one poster on it, right? And if it's got a GTA 6 poster, you're not going to get your Squadron 42 poster on it. So it doesn't matter that it's for different audiences because you're not getting the message out there.
Right.
I mean, for me, right, I've just got on the Squadron 42 website, and at time of recording, it still says launch is 2026. So that is still the official line. My view is, I think, for a game like this, where you've got like A-list actors and stuff, and if you've got the kind of copy ready to go, you could probably put together a meaningful campaign for 90 days. It wouldn't be ideal, but like you'd probably get a decent campaign for 90 days. I would have said 4 to 6 months would be a better run-in, but like 3 months is probably doable. What I hope happens is that what we're talking about is the issue, that CIG are going to be monitoring the situation carefully, and that there'll be like a really good go, no-go window. For me, the natural time to release Squadron 42 would be November or December for holiday season. Like that would be the ideal time. For the Star Citizen players, that's the time of CitizenCon, usually just after kind of the IAE stuff. For the wider kind of marketing area, you've got all of the Black Friday stuff, and something like this with like Henry Cavill or Gillian Anderson or Mark Hamill's face on it in a digitized Squadron 42 UE Navy uniform, like would look really cool. I really hope that's where we get to. I know there have been some rumors from some credible sources that 26 is off the table. I really hope that's not the case, but ultimately, we're going to have to wait for announcements to find out. In my mind, if I've not heard anything by the end of September, it ain't happening.
Yeah. Yeah, if I don't see anything at Summer Games Fest, I don't think it's happening. And even now, you know, the source, by the way, is Astropub. Paul's been on the show quite a bit, y'all know. And he did put out a video. I would suggest going to check it out, where he talks about some contacts that he's talked to inside of CIG who have insinuated or implied that maybe there is a delay. This is not confirmed, obviously, and I don't want to do too much to try and spread a rumor that's not confirmed, but we are at a point where everybody is playing with this idea. And like I said, Chris was interviewed in February, and he told the interviewer at that point they were aiming for late in this year. Obviously, we still talk about GTA, but the words he used was later this year. Chris was then interviewed for Variety in May. This, I think, was actually a very much more planned kind of interview, a chance for them to guide the narrative on the $1 billion past, and still, with what I assume are carefully chosen words, made sure to avoid saying anything about the current year or a number, and just said, we're in the closing stages. So I think there are some definite signs that they are trying to soften the possibilities of what's happening this year. Probably waiting to see if we're like right on the cusp of having this ready. I think October may be too early. Possibly November is good. Can we release in November of this year? GTA 6 just went through its latest earning reports on May 21st. They did not announce a delay, which I think is what everyone was waiting for. And now we are already seeing companies like Microsoft are starting to shift games. They just delayed Fable into February of 2027 because they said the ending of the year was too crowded. But they probably were in the same boat. They couldn't release in August. They needed a couple more months for polish. So they just wanted to see if November was going to be open or not, and it's not. So I don't think anybody is going to be like super surprised by this if they do delay it. But because it's Squadron 42, it's gonna land differently from every other game that gets pushed because of GTA.
Yeah.
Either way, we'll just have to see. I hope it's I hope whatever we do get to see, whether there's a delay, whether it's coming this year or whatever have you, I hope what we see is enough to show people that what they've built is an interesting experience and it's going to be good. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up. We are at our finishing moment. I want to give you one chance, though, to give us a new and improved preview, as you do, before heading off, something that might be happening in the next couple of months. If you give me 1 second, I can actually tell you what you had said last time. Basically just the whole B. You were right about that.
Oh, yeah.
So what would you like to predict this time that we can come back to in a couple months?
Can I do like a a hopium prediction that I think is unlikely, but something I want to see.
I love those, dude. Yes.
I would love to see them release the Javelin. She's pretty much ready. Like, I think they're only holding on to it because they want to figure out this whole modularity thing, but they've kind of already done that with the Apollo. And because they don't want any spoilers, well, they said that for the Idris and then released it anyway. It's pretty much ready. We know that we're expecting the Galaxy later this year. Now they've said Kraken for May next year. So, like, why would you sit on this, like, wonderful capital ship asset that is ready to go and is going to get people going? And PS could tie in very well to the whole Xeno threat event that's coming up. So I would love to see that. Oh, and actually, as Krasik says, they accidentally let people claim it in PTU for a little bit.
Yeah.
That asset definitely wasn't ready, by the way. But yeah, so my hopium prediction is I would love to see the Javelin, but I've probably been saying that for about 12 years now.
Looking for his favorite ship to come in game. I feel you.
Yeah.
I get that. I hope it happens. Hopefully we can, and I hope, honestly, capital ship gameplay grows with it when it does. That would be great.
That would be great. But to be fair, I would hope with the Javelin that it's more like the Polaris in that the pilot flies the ship.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Agree with you there. One last real quick one I want to hear your thoughts on. We got a second GATAC ship coming alongside the Raylan Alien Week. Any thoughts on what it might be?
No, but I'm intrigued.
So am I. They kind of hinted at it possibly being a snub, which would be interesting. Definitely industrial focus, though, so that's fun. All right, man. Thank you so much for this talk. Thanks for joining me, Farrister. It's always a great time catching up with you. If you could let folks know where they might find more of your content before we sign off, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I can be found on YouTube/Farrister.
Easy and simple. We'll have all the links for you guys down below. Thanks again for joining. If you guys enjoy the podcast, consider leaving a review, a rating, or sharing with your Star Citizen friends. We also touch on some other games sometimes, so keep an eye out if you like that stuff. Thank you all for being here. Hope you enjoyed this talk. See you in the next one.